Hi everyone, and ready for a new and great roundtable. Thinking about what we have right now in the panel, I am really impressed and really happy. If we check around, we have people and investors and players from a lot of places in the world. So remember, today talks, today roundtables are about connecting the ecosystems and checking about what is going on with the investment and the ecosystem. So really glad to say hello to everybody. We have met some of us in different places in the world, like in Mexico or in Brussels and so on. So thank you for being here, and again, thank you also to Everest Foundation for supporting us and to broadcasting. And this is it. Thank you again. Thank you from Startup Ole, and let's enjoy another amazing panel with incredible speakers. Thank you, guys. And again, Startup Ole.
Emilio, thank you very much indeed. Well, let me present myself. First of all, welcome to this session, to this afternoon session about new trends in investment. My name is Werner Sippold. I'm the CEO of Ideals. In Ideals, we actually work with the whole innovation ecosystem, with corporates, with startups, and with VCs to create the ventures that will hopefully drive tomorrow's energy transition. And before that, I've actually dedicated my professional life to building ventures within big corporations as an entrepreneur for the last 17 years. So we are still missing two of the panel members, but hopefully they will be able to connect a bit later. So we'll start, and hopefully they will join us in a couple of minutes. I guess we want to talk about the state of the investment community and what trends are there. I think one of the trends we see in the world, one of the evolutions, is that over the last years, probably both our societies and our environment has become more and more fragile. And I guess when we want to solve these problems, we have to actually do that by driving innovation. So I guess our investments, we would not only ask them to create wealth, we would also ask them to create impact on solving some of these urgent questions which we might have in public health, social inclusion, human rights, and the ecosystem. So I guess certainly the investment community has been thriving over the last years. Martin, welcome.
Hi, how are you? Sorry
that you've been able to join. Bill, also welcome. Great you made it.
Wow. That was exciting.
Thank you very much indeed. I have already started with the introduction, but you haven't missed anything important.
Yeah.
So as I said, we probably would ask from our investments and from the startup community that we do not only contribute to creating more wealth in the world, but also to have an impact on some of the urgent issues which we see emerging more and more, like obviously public health, social inclusion, human rights, and obviously the threat that climate change supposes, and the fragility of the ecosystem. Now, as I said, I think the last years have been good years for the investment communities, but how we are doing in terms of creating wealth and impact on these urgent issues, and what will the current crisis change in the short term, because I'm sure we all see changes in the short term, but are there also some trends that might actually be here to stay? So I'm actually very curious to get the perspective of our speakers on these topics. And I would like to present very briefly the different speakers on the panel. We have with us Luis Gerva. He's responsible for the program committee at CEDETI in Spain. In that role, and even before that, he's been working very closely with the research and development programs of the European Union. And currently he's the Spanish delegate for the European Innovation Council within the program Horizon 2020, which is the big European research and innovation program. There's with us Mark Petty. He's the Executive Director of Innovation Strategy at Visa. I think Mark's origin is computer science. He told me that in his early career days, he actually was part of the team that developed one of the first internet trading platforms, or the first internet trading platform in Europe for Lehman Brothers. And now for 10 years, Mark has been working for Visa, and since 2017, he's running Visa Ventures in Europe. And actually the first investment he made with Visa was Klarna, which probably wasn't the worst investment you ever made in your life, because I guess they're doing quite well. So welcome. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
With us is also Bill. I'm never quite sure how I pronounce a name of German origin in English.
Reichert.
Reichert.
Yeah.
He's a partner at Pegasus Tech Ventures. Bill has an undergraduate degree from Harvard. Then he did an MBA at Stanford, and that was his way into Silicon Valley. After what he calls a tour of duty at McKinsey & Company, I think I imagine what you refer to. I worked almost 5 years for BCG, so I imagine that's quite similar an experience. And he's a serial entrepreneur with 2 IPOs, and today a venture capitalist investing in over 100 companies, including seed investment into unicorns. So great to have you here. A real pleasure that you join us.
Thank you.
That's with us Hector Shivata. He's portfolio director at Arca Continental Ventures, corporate venture capital funds, where he's actually responsible for the investment process and the management of the portfolio. He's also teaching at a business school in entrepreneurial finance. In sort of his former stages of his professional life, he held various positions in private equity and in corporate investment banking, and he also participated in a fintech startup. So welcome, Hector. Great to have you here. And last but not least, Martin Umaran, co-founder and chief of staff of Globant Ventures. Well, Martin, you're one of the 4 founders of Globant, so this is one of the stories that 4 guys are together in the taxi, and they have a great idea. And that great idea has evolved into a 14,000 people company that gives service to Fortune 500 companies in delivering digital transformation. And it's a 7 billion public company on the New York Stock Exchange. So I think about 2 years ago, you started Globant Ventures to invest in technology-based startup companies, first in Argentina, then in the whole of Latin America. And I think currently you are expanding also into Europe. So a very warm welcome to you as well. So I'm looking very much forward to have your vision on the topic of our panel. So what trends do you see? And maybe that is my fundamental curiosity. Are we as an investment community really answering the big challenges of today's world, and not only in terms of creation of wealth? So let me start by alphabetic order. So Luis, if you if you could share sort of your view on how we are doing in terms of trends in investment.
So thank you very much for the invitation for this session, especially for all the people from Startup Ole. I think I come from CDTI, which is the national agency in Spain for innovation. We are national, but we already have some initiatives in private equity, and we support seed funding. But I'm not going to talk with that hat. Let's call it that way. I'm going to talk with the other hat of our house, which is the one linked to European Commission programs. As you know, CDTI is more or less in charge of some of these programs, and namely one of the key programs for that is the European Innovation Council. This is a part of the current framework program of research and innovation, and it will be part of the next Horizon Europe framework program for the European Commission. It's about research and innovation, but we are here talking about investment. So how does it fit? That's the main question. So the idea now with the Commission in this new approach is that it's no longer going to give only grants to companies for the development, but they are also entering into the equity world. So how this European Innovation Council is a mix, is a kind of putting together both worlds and offering companies on one side a grant for helping them to develop their technology further. They are starting at demo level in some cases. They need to get quite a long way until they are, let's say, ready to market, especially in those sectors which are really deep tech and whose step by step into the technology advances are not so quick, and even in where the investor is not ready to enter so quick in these companies. So the idea of the company of the European Commission is put together both things. On one side, putting grants to develop this technology further, and on the other side, offering these companies equity to start deploying these technologies, especially in Europe. So more or less they are looking for, let's call it technology sovereign in Europe, but especially in the later stage that they will still maintain in Europe. So just to understand the sizes of the type of things that the European Commission is trying to put forward, we are talking about 5,000 million euros in 2021 to 2027 dedicated for that, more or less half in grants and half in equity. So at the end of the day, it's really a good opportunity especially for companies, obviously for startups, for spin-offs, especially those coming from research world, which first funding is not so easy in very many cases, especially in, as I told you before, those sectors which are not quickly return of investment. And this is the case for companies. But it is also a very good opportunity for investors because the Commission is not willing to do it alone. They would like in fact, they are open to make co-investment with companies already being supported with investors, but not so much, and would like to be open to make this kind of co-investment. If we talk about the tickets, more or less the sizing we are seeing currently in the Commission, we are talking a grant up to 2.5 million euros in grants at the coverage of the 70% of the cost, which is a quite relevant amount of money, especially for companies in those which, let's say, it's long development stages. And they are thinking on equity up to 15 million euros in the companies. So at the end of the day, it's a quite, let's say, interesting offer for the companies throughout Europe, for all Europe, for all member states, and even for associated countries. So the next question is how can companies get to that? Because it's not so how the process works for selecting those companies. Since it comes partly from, let's say, public funding, they have a very regulated steps. There is a clear and transparent process of selection with a guide for applicants, with an application the companies have to come with an interview. So it's more or less mixing also again the process of public funding just with written text, with the process as you guys use in VCs with interviews and having thorough interaction with the founders and with the team. So this process is going to start formally in 2021, but already there are some already tested this since 2018. The last opportunity for this test, let's call it that way, this pilot, as the Commission call it, is in October this year. And for next year, from 21 to 27, there will be about 2-3 opportunities a year for companies to come to this kind of support. So regarding the trends you commented, what are the criteria you're looking for? What type of companies they are looking for? Yes, as you know, the European Commission is making a lot of effort in the new strategy of Green Deal. So they are looking towards this kind of a strategy with this foremost focus. And also the second type of companies they are looking for are those companies with long development cycles. That is we call it energy, we call it transition for green elements and all these kind of things, materials, health, and these kind of companies. So more or less that's the trend we are looking for. And I think it's really a new approach that the European Commission is doing that. Obviously, the fund itself is quite big, and they are going to be managed by the European Investment Bank. So I know it's a quite, let's say, well-known actor in the field of investment. So I think more or less it's a clear picture of what we can see now at European level.
Thank you much, Luis. I think I personally would be interested in having the view on this of the 3 panel members from the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, where maybe the role of the European Union would be taken by VCs, right? So I think there are still very different approaches to how you invest in innovation on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean. So maybe if you feel like you can have a word on this later on. So thank you very much, Luis, for your contribution. Mark, the floor is yours.
And that's great to be here. So maybe a quick scene set. So I'm slightly different than my other panelists. So being part of a corporate venture activity, the way we look at investment will be slightly different. Okay, and really, when we invest, it is about supporting and cementing a commercial partnership. So whenever we look at a business and think about investing in it, it is always through a partnership lens first and foremost. And then we look to invest really to make sure we're aligned as businesses and we can drive the outcomes that we're looking for. So just to give you that as kind of a scene set and how we think about the world, looking at sort of trends across investments, and my purview is mainly around fintech. So it's mainly the financial services sector. Although we are obviously interested in retail from a Visa point of view, we work with banks, but we are focused on facilitating commerce between sort of consumers and retail predominantly. So that is kind of where we focus. Looking at our portfolio companies and generally out there and seeing some of the numbers, new money is obviously a lot harder to come by since the pandemic hit. We're seeing a lot more VCs focusing on their current portfolio businesses, making sure they're well funded to ride the storm. I think saying that, this pandemic has very much created what I'd call a digital reset, and it will be a digital recovery that we see. We're very much seeing that in terms of where new investment is actually going. It will be in those businesses that are more exposed to e-commerce, for example, or helping current retailers move to online from being a purely physical presence. So I think there's numerous trends there. If we talk about valuation, I think certainly fintech has seen fairly frothy valuations over the last 18 months, maybe 2 years. I think that started to become slightly more realistic, which I think is a good thing. And we're seeing a lot of investment actually that is, and not to get technical, but is more contract, more loan notes. Okay, so ultimately waiting until things settle down and there'll be a price in the future. So effectively offering loans to companies that will convert at some point to equity in the future. So we're seeing a lot more of those, which is effectively deferring the pricing decision. And we're seeing, certainly in the fintech world, a lot more mega deals. So we may see a drop in the number of deals that are actually happening and a drop in the volume of cash that's actually going into these businesses. But we're seeing also some of these mega deals. So it's the Monzos of this world the checkout.coms of this world that are raising hundreds of millions, but ultimately that's soaking up a lot of the available capital for other businesses. So certainly that's a trend we have seen, and it's great that we've certainly got someone from or involved with the commission. I think a lot of encouraging seed investment and investment in those first checks to those new companies is going to be essential going forward. So anything governments can do to support that, I think, will help a big hole certainly that we see in Europe. In terms of our world and where we're looking at investment, I think big banks who have claimed huge transformation budgets for digital, I think they stay. I think banks will continue to invest. They've got to service their customers. It's more challenging with their branch networks today, and they're effectively not that cost effective for a bank anyway. So I think they'll continue to invest in that side of the world. Physical retailers have many challenges, particularly if you look at grocery and big supermarkets, hypermarkets. They're now having to think about optimizing for online. So maybe it's just some data that you might find quite interesting is that from a Visa perspective, what we've seen in markets like Belgium and Ireland, that 40% of Visa cardholders did not shop online prior to March 2020 are now making e-commerce transactions. So all of a sudden you've got a new cohort of consumers that are willing to go online and transact. And I think this is going to persist, right? E-commerce is more convenient in many respects. And these digital changes are going to persist. So I think those kind of themes and areas are obviously super interesting, where businesses are helping banks or retailers adjust to this next normal, if you like. I think that's really interesting areas to invest in. I think we'll get into sort of social justice and financial inclusion, things like that a little bit later on in the panel. But obviously, I think this pandemic has actually created far more awareness, highlight, and other things that have happened in the world. I just think people care more, and where businesses are being more transparent, able to give consumers choice and visibility on the people they're doing business with, they're the kind of investments and businesses that are starting to emerge as well. So I think that's a particularly interesting area. And finally, obviously, health is going to be interesting as well, particularly remote health and tracking and those things. That's it from me anyway for now.
Mark, thank you very much. Very interesting. Bill,
Yes.
what is your view on things? What has been happening, and what do you think will happen? I mean,
Yeah, it's a crazy world, and it's going to keep going, and we don't know how much crazy there's going to be going forward. But to your question about what's going on in venture capital globally, and is it addressing some of the key challenges that we should be addressing? My feeling is that entrepreneurs have been way out ahead of government in terms of addressing critical challenges. If you just look at the big trends over the last cycle, the big trend is that everything is trending. Everything is now subject to entrepreneurship and venture capital. We have ed tech, right? We have ag tech, we have biotech, we have clean tech. We've got reg tech, we've got fem tech, we've got fintech, we've got prop tech, we got martech, we got tech everything. And so we're seeing that entrepreneurs are penetrating into every corner of our society, of our business, of our lives. We've got smart buildings, we've got smart cities, we've got smart factories. We've got autonomous drones, we've got autonomous cars, we've got autonomous buses, we've got autonomous, everything. So it has been a dramatic, cycle for venture capital and entrepreneurship. So the good news is that entrepreneurship has penetrated sort of all of these key challenges that we're facing as society. We're seeing sort of enormous rush, perhaps into sort of the health tech space and the biotech space on sort of every dimension because of this pandemic. And then as I guess Mark was just mentioning, as a response, we're seeing entrepreneurs taking advantage of the second order issues, the distancing, e-commerce and delivery. So the pandemic is accelerating some of these trends. It's whacked several sectors, so that's been an issue, and that's a tough, that's, if you're an entrepreneur in those sectors, or if you've got a portfolio in those sectors, that's a challenge. So we've seen this just enormous surge in entrepreneurial energy and in venture capital investment sort of across all these sectors. That's the good news. And the bad news, and I should state it maybe as a concern, and not, we don't know if it's true yet, but one of the things I'm worried about with this pandemic, so I've been around for a few cycles, both as an entrepreneur and as an investor. And in each cycle, Europe shrinks. In each cycle, European investors pull back. And I worry, I don't know how that's going to play out in this cycle, but I worry that in this cycle, we're going to see European investors get even more conservative. The good news is that some global investors, international investors, Pegasus Tech Ventures, we're a global investor. We haven't slowed down. We are, our LPs are not slowing us down. The entrepreneurial opportunities are not slowing down. As far as we can see in the United States, there is some effect of the pandemic, definitely, in terms of sector allocation. But there is so much money that is so interested in the opportunity afforded by, venture capital and investing in innovation, that it hasn't been nearly the impact that we saw in the meltdown, in the global financial crisis. And I'm sorry, who was our friend who was at Lehman Brothers? That was, what was, well, yeah, it wasn't your fault, is it?
It wasn't my fault. To be honest, that was 1999. I was way before the 2008.
Okay.
I've been out of there at least 6 years by that.
All right.
You
Okay.
can't pin that on me.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to blame you, but yeah, I mean, this, certainly there's been an impact here. But I do worry in the smaller ecosystems around Europe and around the world, if the investors are going to pull back, and which will generally, to your earlier point, that leaves it to the government. And again, God bless governments for supporting entrepreneurship, but if the ecosystems don't get the private money, the corporate money, the institutional money, the angel money, the entrepreneurial money, if they don't harness that, then it's hard for an ecosystem, to keep scaling. So I'm hoping that, this cycle will be a little bit different, and hopefully investors on the private sector side will see this as a time of opportunity and not necessarily a time to pull back.
Yeah, I hope that everybody in Europe and in the rest of the world will hear and heed your words, because I really think that would be extremely important. Thank you very much, Bill, for your contribution.
Mm-hmm.
Hector, if you could please share your thoughts on the topic with us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We are a corporate VC fund. As you pointed out at the beginning, we are sponsored by a Coca-Cola bottler in Mexico, though we invest globally. And basically what we have noticed is that COVID has disrupted and accelerated retail, e-commerce, and many other industries. So for instance, in terms of e-commerce, it has increased the penetration, at least in the US, from 16% to 27% in recent months. And we see a lot of companies globally that they are doing a huge push in order to increase digitalization and e-commerce globally. In terms of the VC market, what we see is that at least in the US market, what's going on is based on information from NCA, the deals have decreased dramatically.
I think I at least have some difficulty in understanding you.
Yeah.
Can you hear me better?
Yeah.
It's better.
Okay. Can you hear me better?
I think now it's better. Let's see if it works.
Okay, so the deals in the US, they have decreased dramatically, especially in the seed stages. It has plunged 70% more or less in terms of the activity vis-a-vis the previous year in the first half of the year. We see strong valuations, especially in later stages in the VC market, though the seed deals they have a tough time these days, especially in the US and the Americas. Some impact in terms of different industries, if, let's say, for instance, in terms of food. Food has had a very significant tailwind given the pandemic. So right now you see a lot of dark kitchens, ghost kitchens, drop kitchens coming in the market. So that's a huge activity. And you see huge transactions in this market. So for instance, some Uber acquired DoorDash, Deliveroo, they just raised a round in the UK for almost $600 million. So there's a lot of deals and there's a lot of activity going on right now in terms of the e-commerce food space. Also, what we are noticing is that penetration increased dramatically. And not only that, but also there are some spaces, like let's say, for instance, logistics. In terms of logistics, we see a lot of companies doing a lot of things in this pandemic. So for instance, there are a lot of firms that are trying to invest in inventory and work management systems. Also, not only that, but also dispatch optimization is going on the rise, similar to route optimization as well. And in terms of the fintech world, what we have noticed is that there are new trends. Obviously, everything related to different industries is coming on the market at these days. So there's a new trend called embedded fintech or embedded finance. And you see more companies, let's say, for instance, in retail or in any other industry, that they are using fintech in order to, first of all, strengthen the processes, let's say the payment processing in the business. And not only that, but also they are acquiring fintech as a way to strengthen the portfolio in those sectors. So you see a lot of activity in the fintech world. The companies, they are still rising a lot of cash globally. And you see that there are a lot of unicorns right now in fintech. You find more than 66 unicorns in fintech for more or less 250 billion. So overall, what we are noticing is that VC funds, first of all, at the very beginning, they tend to manage the portfolio. Right now, we see more activity, and we expect the activity to pick up in the next coming months.
Thank you very much indeed, Joe. Martin, I think it's your turn. Welcome. The floor is yours.
It's not gonna be easy,
So, cannot hear you.
Can you hear me?
Hear you.
Yeah. You have a headset?
Now you hear me? No?
Not too well.
No, not too well, I'm afraid.
Do you have a headset? Okay. So,
I know what's going wrong. Okay. What about now?
well,
Now, can you hear me?
Much
It's
better.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I used to be an engineer. I still have some tricks. So sorry. No, I was saying that it's not easy to talk after so many smart people, but I'm not very smart, but I'm a smart learner. So I learn a lot from you. Now, Bill described quite well, the world we are living. where tech is everywhere, definitely. That's quite clear. At Globant, we think that we know a bit about tech, and we started Globant Ventures like 3 years ago with the idea to invest in technology-based startups that are doing things that we would like to learn more about that. It's nothing better for learning than being close to a group of entrepreneurs that are trying to develop an idea. They're usually challenging the system, challenging the status quo, and you can learn a lot from them when you are just more, even when we have some entrepreneurial spirit, it's difficult to keep that when you are a 40,000 people company. So it's easier when you have the opportunity to talk and see how some entrepreneurs are doing. So our idea with Globant Ventures was to start investing in that companies and to help them. Usually, we invested in companies in Latin America. We are now trying to go, to Europe and other places. We have invested like $10 million up to date. It's to help them to internationalize their business, to go global. And I think that this pandemic has accelerated that, big way. It's amazing. I think one of the challenges that we have today is that, entrepreneurs are going to be all around the world. It's not that they have to go to Silicon Valley or maybe or to Boston, New York to start a company, because you find people say, where are you based? I'm based, I don't know, let's say San Francisco, but my CTO is in Singapore. My engineering team is based in China or in Argentina, wherever, So definitely there are global teams, and they learn to work globally. And I think it's a challenge for investing, because you're going to need to go for that companies that are going to be based. Sometimes not. Usually you are close to the business, but business is everywhere. So the entrepreneurs are going to base their business where they feel more comfortable. And this is also a challenge for countries. You don't know where is a digital business, where they are based, where you're going to tax them, who we are going to subsidize with their business. I think that opens a lot of, not very nice challenges. And definitely the world we're going to live is much interesting. And definitely the use of technology, intensive use of technology, opens a big challenge for the way we are delivering our services, we are developing our products, we're thinking our companies, and of course the way we're going to invest. Today, no one is, and in these days, no one is expecting to see you in person. We're all around the world. We are talking in this event. We are not sharing a physical space. We're sharing mental space, a virtual space. And the same thing is going to happen with the investment. You're going to need to do it perhaps without seeing people. How you're going to build, how we're going to build the traditional, human, capital that when you sit down with someone, try to understand the team, see how they work, all that stuff must be done virtually. I don't know, I'm old-fashioned. I like to go out and have some dinner, lunch, whatever, with people to know, but we are going to need to know people through using these virtual tools. So I think it's a very interesting challenge.
Yep.
Martin, thank you very much. I think for me, one of the interesting questions that have come up in the conversation, I do think that the sort of startup ecosystem is sort of becoming a lot more international, but still sort of the funding, as you said before, Bill, I mean, if you look at the European Union and the US, which in size of the economy are almost equal, then in terms of the funding that there is for investments, the European Union is still a dwarf compared to the US. And I think there is a challenge. How can we distribute? I mean, obviously we've gone a long way probably in the last decade in terms of having more spots around the world where you start to have ecosystems that can really support the startup community. But I still do feel there's still a long way to go. And so how do we bring the different parts of the world at least to par in terms of their economic size to the US?
The thing we saw here in the US that was, I think, maybe relevant in Europe is certainly here on the West Coast. What happened was because, Los Angeles, San Diego, and Portland, Seattle are, a one-day turnaround for Silicon Valley. What we had was this interconnection across these ecosystems on the West Coast that enabled us as VCs in Silicon Valley to be active investors in multiple ecosystems. If you accept that, Los Angeles is a different ecosystem than Silicon Valley, which, most people would see that. The distance between Silicon Valley and San Diego and Seattle is comparable to any distance within Europe. Right? I mean, and so I think it may be that ecosystems connecting, regionally could accelerate each other if you could spend more time connecting sort of across ecosystems, in addition to what happened in Los Angeles and Seattle and San Diego, was the successes of those ecosystems bred an internal local capacity at the entrepreneurial level, at the venture capital level, at the corporate level, at the support level. And I think that's accelerated spinning up those ecosystems. So, if I'm an ecosystem in Europe, instead of trying to go it alone and trying to be, sort of the biggest dog on the block, I would be trying to connect my ecosystem with, I don't know, if it's London, if it's Berlin, with other successful ecosystems, in the region, so that the investment community is accustomed to connecting in these different ecosystems. So I think to some extent that's what some of the US investors and UK investors have done with Europe. And there's been some of that, but it's just a thought in terms of the VCs and the entrepreneurs, sort of connecting with each other rather than staying local.
What do the other panel members think? Maybe in order of appearance, Luis, what are your thoughts? We don't have a lot of time left, but I'm really interested to hear the thoughts of all of you.
I have just one more reflection on what Bill says, is that what in States is a regional ecosystem, in Europe is a country ecosystem. So probably this is the main, let's say, barrier, let's call it that way, that you connect probably regions. It's easy to connect countries. That's my feeling, especially in Europe, where we have 27 countries with different, let's say, mindsets, regulation, and many stuffs. Probably this limits a bit of this connection. And I agree with you that on a case-by-case basis, this connection is feasible, and probably, let's say, on the higher part of the operations, this connection do happen. But the thing is that for the rest of them, which are below this threshold, this lack of connection avoids them to become bigger. Probably, I feel that's the main problem in Europe. We are really able to, let's say, create companies and give them the first push. But when the big push is needed, there is not enough, let's say, I wouldn't say money, but actors willing to do it jointly. Probably that is one of our main problems of being, let's say, international instead of being regional.
Mark, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so just quickly, maybe a point that hasn't really been made. I think there's an element of success breeds success. And I think take for example, let's look at Sweden. Sweden's a very small country. There's not many people there. I'm probably doing it a disservice if I say it's about 5 million people.
No, it's closer to 10, but
yeah. Apologies, I did them a disservice. And I think it's Norway. It's 5. Yes. Okay. So anyway, I think if you look at Skype and Nicholas Enstrom that started Skype, sold Skype to Microsoft. He started Atomico, big VC. You've then got Spotify, you've got Klarna, you've got Truecaller. So I think there is a success breeds success, and that ultimately does build for a very strong ecosystem. And I absolutely agree with all the points around, actually federating ecosystems, making sure that those relationships are there. It is a country by country type approach and system, I think, in Europe, particularly in the UK. But I think success does breed success. So that's the point I think is important. And I always find actually the US tend to be more ambitious or have more blind faith, I don't know, and have more big outcomes. Whereas I think Europe gets nervous as the checks get bigger, maybe. But anyway, just some observations.
I think that, what's happening sometimes is that when it's very cultural thing, when governments or agencies from governments invest, there's a lot of regulation all around, and entrepreneurs don't like regulation. It's not, you need to, of course, you need to comply with that, but you really need freedom to develop your business, and that's very important. The most probable outcome of an entrepreneur is to fail. It's not to win. So, and it's difficult to invest millions of dollars in something and to fail, and you have to explain why that's failed. So I think that sometimes what's happening with the European model, it's that it's as being too regulated by governments. Sometimes that's how, and you need some freedom. And what's happening today is with, I don't think that people in one place is more ambitious than people in another place. I think everyone is very ambitious. But what you need is to set the right, environment or the right ecosystem for that people, and things start to happening. I think that there are amazing entrepreneurs all around the world. But with the digital world, it's going to be difficult to put borders, to innovation or to entrepreneurship, because they're going to be all around.
How do you see the situation in Latin America, Martin?
I think that we have the worst of two worlds, So we have a lot of regulations, with no money. So I think that at some time our governments like, the European model of being more regulated, but at the same time they can't provide the funds. So I think that we need to decide what game we want to play. I think that there are great entrepreneurs, but it's very difficult to start a business from here. And definitely, I think that we need to decide what more we want to follow. But it's tough. It's not easy. There are too many regulations all around.
Yeah, I have a couple of comments. The first thing is, I do believe that it's a systemic issue, entrepreneurship. So basically what you need to consider is many multiple considerations, such as cultural issues, the entrepreneurial spirit, and obviously regulation and many other factors. And just take into account a country such as Israel. Israel is a key example about doing the right things for many years. And on every single year, they have more than 8,000 startups. And on every single year, they get funded they raise more or less like between $8 to $10 billion, and it's more or less like 30%, 35% the amount that is raised in Silicon Valley. And a lot of the Israeli companies, when they build a company, obviously they build it for the globe, for the entire world, and not only for the Israeli ecosystem. So that's the first element. And not only that, but they also expand very fast since the beginning in other geographies, mainly in the US. The second geography is Asia, and the third geography is, LATAM and Europe and other geographies. So that's the first point. And in terms of LATAM, we are based in Mexico, and in Mexico and in LATAM, we just see a report, a research conducted by LAPCA. LAPCA is the Latin America Venture Capital Association, and in Latin America last year they raised more or less $5 billion, the startups. So I would say the market is picking up in LATAM very, very fast. You see very strong ecosystems, especially in Brazil. They are the leaders in the market. And second, Mexico. And third comes Colombia and the other countries. So in my mind, it's all about the system. It's all about what we do as investors or what we do as entrepreneurs in order to build and grow the market. And it's not about the governments and the regulations.
Well, thank you very much indeed. I feel like going on for a couple of hours still. I have a lot of more questions I would like to ask you, but I think we are running out of time. We've already overrun 6 minutes.
Okay.
So thank you very much indeed. It was a very interesting conversation for me. Maybe this little group can be one seed to actually create regional and global connections. That would already be a good contribution of today. So thank you very much indeed, and hope that this is not the last time we're in touch. So thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
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 If you see any great companies, let me know.
Yeah, I will. Don't worry.
Keep you posted. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you much.